I could feel 20 pairs of eyes boring into me as my boss's voice sliced through the conference room like shattered glass. The sting of his words, "Your contract ends today, effective immediately," was still sinking in when my intern, usually silent as a shadow in these meetings, suddenly stood up. The room froze. What she said next drained every drop of color from his face. And in that moment, I realized she'd been playing a game none of us had seen coming. My name is Elena Markham, and I'd spent 3 years building something extraordinary at our dentist group until Gregory Vance decided to destroy it all in front of everyone who mattered. The quarterly strategy meeting was supposed to be my moment. I'd arrived at the glass-walled conference room on the 40th floor 15 minutes early. My presentation loaded, my data bulletproof. The markets I managed had hit record growth, 18% above projections, and I had the numbers to prove it. My leather portfolio lay open beside me, tabs color-coded, every chart memorized down to the decimal point. Gregory entered the room like he owned the air we breathed. As Vice President of Business Development, he commanded attention with his silver hair and $1,000 suits. But lately, something darker had crept into his interactions with me. He didn't acknowledge my presence, didn't even glance at the materials I'd prepared. Instead, he took his position at the head of the mahogany table and waited as the board members filed in, 20 of our dentist group's most influential decision-makers. Before we begin with the quarterly reviews, Gregory's voice cut through the preliminary chatter. There's a personnel matter that requires immediate attention. My stomach clenched. This wasn't on the agenda. He turned those cold gray eyes on me, and I saw it. The calculated cruelty I'd been too naive to recognize before. Elena Markham's performance has fallen drastically short of our standards. Despite multiple opportunities to course correct, the deterioration in her sector management has become untenable. The words hit like physical blows. I opened my mouth to speak, to present my data, but Gregory raised his hand, a gesture so dismissive it might as well have been a slap. The decision has been made. Your contract with our dentist group is terminated, effective immediately. The silence that followed was suffocating. 20 pairs of eyes turned to me, some shocked, others carefully neutral. But not one person spoke up. Not one board member asked to see my presentation. The papers in front of me, showing my record-breaking quarterly results, might as well have been blank. My hands trembled as I reached for my portfolio. 3 years of 16-hour days, of canceled vacations, of innovations that had transformed our market approach, reduced to this public execution. The fluorescent lights above seemed too bright, making everything appear overexposed and surreal. I could hear someone's pen clicking nervously, the air conditioning humming, my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Margaret Chen from Human Resources wouldn't meet my gaze. David Torrance, who'd praised my Austin presentation just 2 months ago, studied his phone with sudden intensity. Even James Morrison, who'd mentored me through my first year, remained silent. Gregory wasn't finished. Security will escort you to collect your personal items. Your company access has already been revoked. He delivered each word with surgical precision, ensuring maximum humiliation. I stood on legs that felt disconnected from my body. The Hermes watch on my wrist, a gift to myself after landing the Millennium account, suddenly felt like it was burning my skin. Every step toward the door stretched impossibly long, the distance growing even as I moved. I could feel their stares following me, some pitying, others already calculating who would inherit my accounts. That's when I heard the chair scrape against the floor. Sophie Calder, my intern of barely 3 months, stood up. She was usually invisible in these meetings, a slight figure in simple black attire who took notes and distributed documents. But now, something in her posture had changed. Her shoulders were squared, her chin lifted, and her typically downcast eyes blazed with an intensity I'd never seen. "Mr. Vance." Sophie's voice rang clear and steady, nothing like her usual whispered responses. "Before Ms. Markham leaves, I think everyone in this room needs to see something." Gregory's face flushed red. "Sit down immediately, or you'll be following her out." But Sophie was already moving toward the presentation screen, her laptop in hand, I don't think so. Not when Victoria Sloan is about to walk through that door expecting to discuss the revolutionary market strategy that transformed the entire Southeast sector, the strategy you've been claiming as your own. The color drained from Gregory's face so fast I thought he might faint. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. But no words came out. Sophie connected her laptop with practiced efficiency. She's actually standing right behind you, Mr. Vance. She's been listening to everything. The betrayal hadn't happened overnight. It had been a masterpiece of manipulation, executed with the patience of a predator stalking its prey. 2 months ago, everything had been different. Gregory had been my champion, or so I'd believed. When I'd presented my revolutionary market segmentation strategy at the Austin conference, he'd stood beside me, beaming like a proud mentor. The approach was unconventional, targeting microdemographics that our competitors ignored, creating personalized engagement campaigns that turned cold leads into loyal clients. The room had erupted in applause, but one person's reaction mattered more than all the rest. Victoria Sloan, founder of Sloan Global and a legend in our industry, had approached me afterward. Her words still echoed in my memory. This is the kind of innovative thinking that reshapes entire markets. I'd like to discuss potential collaboration opportunities with you directly. That was the moment everything changed. The Monday after Austin, Gregory scheduled an urgent strategy alignment meeting. He'd sat across from me, his expression concerned, almost fatherly. Elena, Victoria Sloan's interest is fantastic for the company, but we need to be careful. She's known for poaching talent. I think it's best if I handle the follow-up communications to protect your position here. I'd been grateful. Touched, even, by his protective stance. Within a week, Gregory began appearing at my client meetings unannounced. Just observing, he'd say. Learning from your approach. He'd sit quietly, taking notes, occasionally offering supportive comments. The clients loved him. His seniority added weight to our pitches. I didn't notice when he started scheduling follow-up meetings without me, telling clients I was overwhelmed with other responsibilities. The erosion of my authority was so gradual I almost missed it. First, the Morrison Industries account was temporarily reassigned to provide me with bandwidth for strategic planning. Then the Apex Group meetings were moved to times that mysteriously conflicted with my other commitments. Gregory always had explanations that sounded reasonable: restructuring for efficiency, maximizing resource allocation, responding to client preferences. But Sophie had seen what I'd missed. 3 weeks into her internship, she'd pulled me aside after a department meeting. We were in the break room, and she'd waited until everyone else had left before speaking. Ms. Markham, I process Mr. Vance's expense reports as part of my duties, she'd said, her voice barely above a whisper. He's been having dinner meetings with your clients. Without you. I'd brushed it off. Gregory was senior management. Of course he'd meet with major clients. Sophie had persisted. He's also been modifying the performance metrics in the system. Your numbers, the real ones. They're being archived before the board sees them. I have access to the audit logs because someone forgot to restrict intern permissions on the legacy reporting system. The blood had drained from my face. That's a serious accusation, Sophie. I know, she'd replied, her usually timid demeanor flickering with something harder. He did the same thing to someone else, someone I cared about. She'd shown me the evidence that day: screenshots, archived emails, system logs showing Gregory accessing my client files at odd hours, downloading my strategic plans, forwarding them to his personal email. The pattern was clear. He was documenting my work under his name, creating a parallel paper trail that positioned him as the architect of our success. Why would you risk your position to tell me this? I'd asked. Sophie's face had darkened. My sister, Rebecca, worked at Morrison Dynamics 5 years ago. She developed a revolutionary supply chain algorithm that would have saved them millions. Gregory was consulting there at the time. He convinced her to share her work, promised to champion her for promotion. Instead, he presented it to the board as his innovation. When she protested, He had her dismissed for insubordination and false claims. She never recovered professionally. Killed herself 2 years later. The revelation had hit me like ice water. Sophie, I'm so sorry. I didn't take this internship for the experience, she'd interrupted. I took it because I knew eventually Gregory would do this again. He always does. But this time, I was ready. She'd pulled out a flash drive. Everything's here, every email, every altered report, every client communication where he claimed your work. But we need to wait for the right moment. If we move too early, he'll bury us both. That moment, it seemed, had arrived. As I stood frozen in the conference room doorway, watching Sophie connect her laptop to the presentation system, I realized she'd been playing a longer game than any of us. The quiet intern who fetched coffee and filed reports had been documenting Gregory's every move, waiting for him to overplay his hand. And now, with Victoria Sloan allegedly standing behind him, Gregory's face had gone from red to white to an almost greenish pallor. His hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles looked like they might burst through the skin. Sophie Calder had been invisible by design, and I was only now beginning to understand the brilliance of her camouflage. When she'd first arrived 3 months ago, everything about her seemed calculated to avoid attention. Plain black suits that hung loosely on her thin frame, hair always pulled back in the same unremarkable bun, glasses that seemed too large for her face. She spoke only when directly addressed, her voice soft and hesitant. In meetings, she'd position herself in corners or behind pillars, taking notes in a small leather journal that looked like it had seen better days. I'd actually felt sorry for her at first. HR had assigned her to support both Gregory and me, splitting her time between our departments. It seemed like too much for someone so seemingly fragile. When Gregory would bark orders at her or dismiss her suggestions with barely concealed irritation, she'd simply nod and whisper, "Yes, Mr. Vance." But there had been moments, fleeting instances I'd dismissed as imagination, when something else flickered beneath that mousy exterior. Once, I'd caught her in the archive room at 6 a.m, surrounded by bankers' boxes dating back 5 years. "Research project," she'd mumbled when I asked. Quickly closing a file labeled Personnel Terminations 2019 to 2020. Another time, I'd found her at her desk after midnight, multiple screens open with what looked like database queries. "Learning the system," she'd explained, minimizing windows too quickly for me to see their contents. The lunch conversation that changed everything had happened 6 weeks ago. We were sitting in the empty cafeteria on a Saturday, both of us working through the weekend, as usual. Sophie had been picking at a salad, seemingly lost in thought, when she suddenly looked up. "Ms. Markham, do you ever wonder why Gregory's team has such high turnover?" The question had caught me off guard. It's a demanding role. Not everyone can handle the pressure. Sophie had set down her fork deliberately. 7 senior strategists in 5 years. All women. All left under mysterious circumstances or were terminated for performance issues despite stellar records. "How do you know this?" "I make it my business to know," she'd said, and for just a moment, the meek intern was gone, replaced by someone with steel in their spine. "He's been doing this for years, taking credit, destroying careers, moving on to the next target. You're just the latest." "Sophie, these are serious allegations. They're facts," she'd interrupted, pulling out her phone. "Jennifer Martinez, 2019, developed the Pacific Northwest expansion strategy. Fired 2 weeks after Vance presented it to the board as his initiative. Lisa Wong, 2020, created the digital transformation framework we still use. Terminated for interpersonal conflicts after she complained to HR. Sarah Brennan, 2021. "Stop," I'd said, my head spinning. "Why are you telling me this?" Sophie had leaned forward, her gray eyes intense behind those oversized glasses. "Because you're different. You've lasted longer than the others. Your work is too visible, too successful to simply steal. So he's trying a different approach. Complete destruction. He's not just taking your ideas anymore, he's erasing you entirely." "And you're what?" Trying to save me out of the kindness of your heart? A bitter smile had crossed her face. My sister was Rebecca Calder. She was brilliant, the kind of mind that comes along once in a generation. She developed algorithmic models that could have revolutionized supply chain management. Gregory destroyed her because she trusted him, because she didn't see the pattern until it was too late. She'd pulled out that leather journal I'd seen her carrying everywhere. Inside weren't meeting notes. They were meticulous records, emails, timestamps, personnel files, financial records, client communications. Pages and pages of evidence, all in her precise handwriting. I've been preparing for 3 years, Sophie had continued. Getting my degrees, building the perfect resume, waiting for an opening in his department. When the internship posted, I knew it was my chance. I've been documenting everything. Every meeting where he claims your work, every altered report, every behind-closed-doors conversation with clients. This is insane. You're talking about justice, Sophie had said firmly. But it has to be done right. If we move too early, he'll destroy us both and walk away clean. We need something bigger, something public, something he can't spin or escape from. She told me her plan that day. Victoria Sloan was already interested in my work. Sophie had been feeding her information through anonymous channels, not enough to be actionable, just enough to keep her curious. She'd been monitoring Gregory's emails through the intern access he'd carelessly granted her, watching him schedule meetings, seeing him prepare to take credit for my entire strategic framework. He's going to make his move soon, Sophie had predicted. He'll try to eliminate you right before the Sloan Global Partnership discussion. That's when we strike. Now, standing in that conference room with Sophie's laptop connected to the screen and Gregory's face drained of all color, I realized her prediction had been perfect. She'd known exactly how this would play out because she'd been orchestrating it from the beginning. The quiet intern who fetched coffee and filed reports had been the most dangerous person in the room all along. The conference room had become a pressure cooker. 20 executives frozen in their seats as Sophie's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard. The sound seemed amplified in the silence, each keystroke a nail in Gregory's coffin. This is highly inappropriate. Gregory's voice cracked as he stood, trying to regain control. Security needs to escort. Sit down, Gregory. The voice came from behind him, and every head in the room swiveled toward the door. Victoria Sloan stood in the threshold, and her presence transformed the atmosphere instantly. At 63, she commanded attention without trying, silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon, a black Saint Laurent suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and eyes that had seen every corporate manipulation in the book. She wasn't supposed to be here until tomorrow. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. Thursday, but there she stood, with 2 of her senior advisors flanking her like bodyguards. Ms. Sloan, Gregory stammered, his face cycling through shades of red and white like a malfunctioning traffic light. You're early. We weren't expecting. Evidently, Victoria said, stepping into the room. Her heels clicked against the marble floor with metronomic precision. Though I find unexpected arrivals often reveal the most interesting truths. Sophie looked up from her laptop, and I caught the ghost of a smile on her lips. The presentation is ready, Ms. Sloan. Sophie contacted me this morning, Victoria announced, addressing the room but keeping her eyes on Gregory. She suggested I might want to attend today's meeting instead of tomorrow's. She said there would be a demonstration of the strategic innovation I've been so interested in. The screen behind Gregory flickered to life. The first slide showed a split screen on the left. My original strategy proposal dated 4 months ago, complete with my digital signature and timestamp. On the right, an identical proposal under Gregory's name, dated just 2 weeks ago, being sent to Victoria Sloan's office. What is this? Gregory's voice had gone shrill. This is fabricated. The metadata doesn't lie, Sophie said calmly, clicking to the next slide. Email threads appeared, Gregory instructing IT to grant him access to my files for oversight purposes, then systematically downloading everything I'd created over the past year. The room had become absolutely airless. Board members who'd sat silent during my humiliation were now leaning forward, their faces mixing shock with self-preservation. They were calculating distances, choosing sides, already drafting their explanations for why they'd let this happen. Victoria walked slowly to the center of the room, each step deliberate. Mr. Vance, you sent me a comprehensive proposal 3 weeks ago claiming revolutionary strategies for market penetration. You scheduled meetings, elaborate presentations, all positioning yourself as the architect of our dentist's remarkable turnaround in the Southeast sector. I oversee that division, Gregory protested, sweat now visibly beading on his forehead. Naturally, I would present our collective work. Collective? Victoria's eyebrow arched. Interesting choice of words. Sophie clicked again. The screen now showed performance metrics, real ones, pulled from the back-end systems. My sector's glowing green with 18% growth, 23% client retention improvement, 31% increase in new acquisitions. Gregory's actual contributions, a sea of red and yellow, stagnant numbers hidden behind creative accounting. These numbers, CFO Michael Roberts suddenly spoke up, his voice tight with anger. These aren't the numbers we've been seeing in board reports. No, Sophie agreed. Those have been adjusted. I have 6 months of audit logs showing Mr. Vance accessing the reporting system after hours, modifying data before board presentations. The original numbers are archived in the backup servers. I've verified them against the client contracts and financial statements. Gregory's legs seemed to give out. He sank into his chair, his mouth opening and closing without producing sound. The polished executive who'd tried to destroy me publicly was dissolving before our eyes. Victoria turned to me. I was still standing near the door, my portfolio clutched against my chest like armor. Ms. Markham, I believe you had a presentation prepared for today? My hands were shaking as I moved back to the table. Sophie quietly disconnected her laptop and gestured to the podium. The room watched in stunned silence as I connected my own computer, pulled up my quarterly report, the one Gregory had refused to let me present. The Southeast Sector Strategy, I began, my voice growing stronger with each word, was built on a foundation of microdemographic targeting that everyone said was impossible to scale. As I spoke, I watched Gregory shrink into his chair. His silver hair seemed to gray further, his expensive suit suddenly looking like costume armor that no longer fit. The board members who'd avoided my eyes were now hanging on every word, some taking notes, others shooting dark glances at Gregory. The 18% growth wasn't an anomaly, I continued, clicking through my slides. It's sustainable, replicable, and scalable across all our markets. The client testimonials, I paused, looking directly at Gregory. The ones Mr. Vance has been collecting in private meetings, all specifically praise the personalized approach that I developed and implemented. Enough. Gregory suddenly burst out, standing abruptly. This is a coup, a carefully orchestrated. You're right, Sophie interrupted, standing as well. It was carefully orchestrated, every move documented, every lie recorded, every theft cataloged. You thought I was nobody, just another intern to fetch your coffee and file your papers. But I've been watching you for 3 months, Mr. Vance. Watching and waiting. She turned to address the board. There are 7 more women whose careers Mr. Vance destroyed. 7 talented strategists who were terminated or forced out after their ideas were stolen. I have documentation for all of them. The room erupted. Board members were standing, voices rising, accusations flying. Michael Roberts was demanding immediate access to the real financial data. HR Director Patricia Stern was on her phone, presumably with legal, and through it all. Victoria Sloan stood perfectly still, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She raised one hand, and the room fell silent. Ms. Markham, she said, I believe we have a partnership to discuss. Perhaps we should continue this conversation in a more appropriate setting. Victoria Sloane moved through the chaos like a ship cutting through stormy waters, untouched by the turmoil around her. She approached me with the kind of deliberate grace that comes from decades of navigating corporate battlefields. "Ms. Markham," she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, steady, an anchor in the madness. "I've been following your work for longer than you might realize." The Austin presentation was simply confirmation of what I'd already suspected, that you're the real innovator behind Ardentis's transformation. Gregory's voice cut through, desperate and raw. "Victoria, please, there's been a misunderstanding. This intern has manipulated." "The only manipulation here," Victoria said, not even turning to look at him, "is yours, Gregory. Did you really think I would partner with Ardentis without conducting my own due diligence?" She pulled out her phone, swiping to reveal an email thread. 3 weeks ago, when you sent me your strategic proposal, I had my team investigate its origins, the language patterns, the analytical approach, even the formatting preferences. They all pointed to someone else, someone whose work I'd seen presented in Austin by a brilliant young strategist who seemed oddly overshadowed by her supposed mentor, CEO Richard Blackstone, who had remained silent throughout the entire confrontation, finally stood. His face was granite, his voice controlled fury. "Ms. Sloane, I assure you, our dentist group does not tolerate this kind of behavior. If these allegations are true—" "They're not allegations," Sophie interjected, her voice carrying surprising authority. "They're facts, and I have 3 years of evidence to prove it." Victoria nodded slowly. "Which brings us to the matter at hand. I came here to offer a partnership worth approximately $200 million over 5 years. But I don't partner with companies that destroy their best talent to feed the egos of mediocre executives." The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. 200 million. Several board members actually gasped. "However," Victoria continued, her eyes finding mine, "I am very interested in working with innovative minds that can transform markets. Ms. Markham, what would you need to make this partnership successful?" My heart was racing, but I forced myself to remain calm. This was the moment Sophie had prepared me for, the opportunity hidden within the crisis. I set down my portfolio and stood straighter. First, I would need full autonomy over the strategic implementation. No interference, no oversight from executives who don't understand the methodology. Gregory made a choking sound. "You can't seriously be considering—" "Second," I continued, ignoring him, "I would need a team of my choosing. People who understand the vision and aren't interested in playing political games." Victoria's smile widened slightly. "Reasonable. What else?" "Third, transparent reporting directly to the board and to Sloan Global. No filtered metrics, no modified numbers. The truth, whether it's good or bad." "This is insane," Gregory exploded, slamming his hand on the table. "You're going to hand over a $200 million partnership to someone who couldn't even defend herself in a meeting?" She was walking out with her tail between her legs until this conspiracy. "The only conspiracy here," Victoria said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "is the one you've been running for years. Stealing work, destroying careers, building your reputation on the brilliance of others. Did you think you were the only one who could play long games, Gregory?" She turned to Richard Blackstone. "I'll make this simple. Either Ardentis immediately addresses this situation appropriately, or Sloan Global will not only walk away from this partnership, but will ensure every major player in our industry knows exactly why. The documentation Ms. Calder has compiled will make for fascinating reading at the next industry summit." The threat was delivered with surgical precision. Ardentis couldn't afford that kind of reputation damage, not with 3 major contracts up for renewal this quarter. Richard's jaw clenched. "Mr. Vance, please remain seated. Legal will need to speak with you." "Patricia?" He turned to the HR director. "I want a full investigation launched immediately. Every termination, every performance review, every project assignment under Mr. Vance's authority for the past 5 years. You can't do this." Gregory's voice had gone hollow. "I've given 15 years to this company. I've built relationships, brought in clients. You've built nothing, I said, finding my voice at last. The words came out steady, controlled, but with years of suppressed anger behind them. You've been a parasite, feeding off the talent of others. Jennifer Martinez's Pacific Northwest strategy that you claimed, it generated $30 million in revenue. Lisa Wong's digital framework, it's still the backbone of our online operations. Sarah Brennan, Rebecca Calder, all the others. Their ghosts have been carrying your career. Sophie opened her journal, reading from a list. Would you like me to contact them? Mr. Blackstone? I have current information for all 7 women. Mr. Vance targeted. I'm sure they'd be interested to know that their cases are being reviewed. The implications were clear. Potential lawsuits, settlements, public scandal. Gregory's face had gone from pale to gray, aging 10 years in as many minutes. Victoria moved toward the door, then paused. Ms. Markham, I have a suite at the St. Regis. Perhaps we could continue our discussion there. And Ms. Calder. She looked at Sophie with something like approval. You should join us. I have a feeling your talents are wasted in an internship. As we gathered our things, Gregory tried one last desperate play. Elena, please. We can work this out. I was trying to protect you, to prepare you for bigger things. The termination was just a negotiation tactic. I stopped, turned, and looked at him, really looked at him. The silver fox exterior was just a shell now, cracking to reveal the small, grasping man beneath. The termination, I said quietly, was the best thing you could have done for me. It showed everyone exactly who you are. The St. Regis suite was a different world from Ardentis's glass and steel. Warm woods, soft lighting, and windows overlooking the city where corporate battles were won and lost every day. Victoria had dismissed her advisors, leaving just the 3 of us in the elegant sitting room. Drink, Victoria offered, moving to the bar. I think we've all earned one. As she poured 3 glasses of what looked like very expensive scotch, Sophie finally let her guard down. The rigid posture melted, and she sank into one of the leather chairs, removing those oversized glasses to rub her eyes. 3 years, she said quietly. 3 years of planning, and it almost didn't work. But it did, Victoria said, handing her a glass. Because you understood something Gregory never did. The long game isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the one who sees everything. She turned to me. Elena, what Sophie did today was remarkable, but she didn't do it alone. She told me something interesting when she first reached out. She said you were the only executive who ever treated her like a person, not just furniture. That's why she chose to save you. I looked at Sophie, remembering all the times I'd asked about her weekend, included her in lunch orders, acknowledged her contributions in meetings even when Gregory dismissed them. Small gestures I'd thought nothing of. My sister, Sophie said, staring into her glass, left detailed journals, every interaction with Gregory, every manipulation, every lie. But she also wrote about the people who stayed silent, who saw what was happening and did nothing. When she died, I inherited those journals. I spent a year reading them, understanding the pattern, planning my approach. Why didn't you just go to the authorities? I asked. Sophie laughed bitterly. With what? Accusations from a dead woman against a successful executive? Gregory was careful. Nothing explicitly illegal, just systematically cruel. I needed him to expose himself. Publicly, undeniably. Victoria set down her glass and pulled out a tablet. Let's discuss the future. Elena, the partnership I'm proposing isn't just about implementing your strategies at Ardentis. I want you to lead a new division, a joint venture between Sloan Global and whoever wins the inevitable power struggle at Ardentis after today. The number she showed me made my breath catch. It wasn't just the partnership value, it was my proposed compensation, equity stake, and resources. And Sophie, Victoria continued, I have a proposition for you as well. My company has been developing a new department, corporate intelligence and ethics oversight. We investigate potential partners, ensure compliance, and identify problems before they become scandals. Someone with your skills would be invaluable. Sophie's eyes widened. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a career. What you did here, the patience, the strategic thinking, the ability to remain invisible until the perfect moment, these are rare talents. Plus, I suspect there are other Gregory Vances out there who need to be exposed. My phone buzzed. A text from Richard Blackstone. Emergency board meeting in 1 hour. Your attendance required. Reinstatement plus terms to be discussed. I showed it to Victoria, who smiled. They're panicking. Good. When you go back, you'll have leverage. Use it. What about Gregory? I asked. Victoria pulled up something on her tablet, a news alert from a financial blog. That would be Sophie's insurance policy. She didn't just document Gregory's internal manipulations. She tracked every client he'd lied to, every partner he'd misled. Those emails went out 30 minutes ago to every major business journalist in the city. The headline was already forming, Our dentist executive accused of systematic fraud in client relations. He's finished, Victoria said simply. Even if our dentist doesn't fire him, which they will, his reputation is destroyed, no firm will touch him. He'll be lucky to get consulting work with startups who don't Google their contractors. Sophie spoke up, her voice steady now. There's something else. The 7 women he destroyed. I've been in contact with all of them. They're willing to come forward now, to share their stories. Some have documented evidence similar to what I gathered. It won't just end his career, it might end in criminal charges for corporate espionage and theft of intellectual property. I felt a complex mix of emotions. Satisfaction, certainly, but also something like pity. Gregory had built his entire life on stolen foundations. Now it was all crumbling. The board meeting, Victoria said, bringing us back to the present. You need to go in with clear demands, not requests, demands. They're terrified right now, both of losing the partnership and of their own complicity being exposed. Sophie, do you have documentation on which board members knew about Gregory's behavior? Sophie smiled, and for the first time, I saw the steel that had driven her through 3 years of preparation. Every email, every ignored complaint, every redirected concern. Margaret from HR received 3 formal complaints about Gregory over the years. She buried them all. David Torrance personally benefited from 2 of the strategies Gregory stole. He knew they weren't Gregory's work, but supported him anyway for the reflected glory. Perfect, Victoria said. Elena, here's what you're going to demand. As she laid out the strategy, I realized we weren't just fighting for my career anymore. We were restructuring the entire power dynamic at our dentist. Sophie's revenge had become something larger, a reckoning for a system that had allowed predators like Gregory to thrive. One more thing, Sophie said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a second journal, pristine and new. This is for you, Elena. Document everything. The good, the bad, the questionable. Because the Gregorys of the world don't disappear, they just evolve. And someone needs to be watching. The private conference room was smaller than the main boardroom. Intimate. Windowless. Designed for conversations that needed to stay buried. Richard Blackstone sat at the head of the table, flanked by legal counsel and Patricia Stern from HR. Gregory was there too, diminished somehow, like a photograph left too long in the sun. Victoria had insisted on attending as an observer, and Sophie sat beside me with her laptop open, fingers poised over the keyboard. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that Gregory couldn't even meet our eyes. Let's cut through the pleasantries, Richard began, his CEO mask firmly in place. The situation is untenable, Mr. Vance. We need to discuss your immediate separation from our dentist group. You can't just, Gregory started. Actually, we can, the legal counsel interrupted. The evidence Ms. Calder compiled shows systematic falsification of reports, theft of intellectual property, and potential fraud in client communications. These are grounds for immediate termination with cause. Gregory's lawyer, he'd somehow managed to get one here in the past hour, leaned forward. My client has been with this company for 15 years. Any separation would require substantial. Your client, Victoria said softly, is about to be the subject of a Wall Street Journal investigation. I believe the reporter's name is James Chen. He's particularly interested in corporate malfeasance cases. He should be calling Mr. Vance within the hour. That was a lie. The reporter's name was Patterson, but the effect was the same. Gregory's face went ashen. However, Richard said, shooting Victoria a dark look. We're willing to offer a quiet exit, resignation, effective immediately, standard severance, non-disclosure agreement. No admission of wrongdoing. That's generous. Gregory's lawyer said quickly. We should consider. No, I said. Every head turned to me. No? Richard's eyebrows rose. Elena, this doesn't concern. It absolutely concerns me. It concerns Jennifer Martinez, Lisa Wong, Sarah Brennan, Rebecca Calder, and 3 others whose careers were destroyed. A quiet exit? That's how this continues. That's how the next Gregory Vance flourishes. Sophie pulled up something on her laptop. Ms. Markham is correct. The pattern shows that Mr. Vance's behavior escalated each time he escaped consequences. Morrison Dynamics, 2018, Quiet Resignation. Apex Corp, 2016, Lateral Transfer to avoid scandal. Each time, he got bolder. What do you want? Richard asked, his patience clearly wearing thin. I pulled out the list Victoria and I had prepared. Full investigation, results to be shared with all affected parties. Restoration of credit for stolen work in all company records and publications. Financial restitution for the 7 women whose careers were derailed. Sophie has calculated the lost earnings and opportunities. And Mr. Vance's termination for cause? On record. That's corporate suicide, Gregory burst out. The publicity alone. The publicity, Victoria interjected, is coming regardless. The question is whether our dentist leads the narrative as a company that uncovered wrongdoing and acted decisively, or gets dragged through the mud as enablers. Patricia from HR had been silent, but now she spoke, her voice trembling. There were complaints. I was told to manage them quietly. That Mr. Vance was too valuable to lose over personality conflicts. Who told you that? Richard demanded. Patricia's eyes darted to Gregory, then back to Richard. The previous CEO, and you were copied on the emails, Richard. 3 years ago, the Sarah Brennan incident. The room went silent. Richard's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine shock. Or perhaps fear. Sophie typed something quickly. I have those emails, Mr. Blackstone. Date-stamped, with raid receipts. This is a witch hunt, Gregory said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was drowning, and everyone knew it. No, I said, standing. This is accountability, something that's been absent from this company for far too long. Victoria stood as well. Sloan Global needs a decision within the hour. Either our dentist commits to complete transparency and reform, or we walk. And just so we're clear, Ms. Markham and Ms. Calder will be joining Sloan Global regardless. The only question is whether they'll be managing a $200 million partnership with our dentists or competing against you with our full resources behind them. The threat landed like a bomb. Losing me and Sophie was one thing. Having us as competition, backed by Sloan Global's resources and armed with intimate knowledge of our dentist's strategies, that was existential. Furthermore, Sophie added, her quiet voice carrying surprising weight, I've been in contact with several of our dentist's key clients. They're very interested in Ms. Markham's methodologies. They've indicated they would follow her to whatever firm she chooses. Gregory laughed bitterly. You've orchestrated all of this. The whole thing. You've destroyed a man's life over what? Sophie's voice cut like ice. Over the careers you stole? The dreams you crushed? My sister killed herself. Mr. Vance, she left a note. Would you like me to read it to everyone? About how you promised her advancement, stole her work, then had her blacklisted when she complained. About how she couldn't get another job in the industry she loved because of the lies you spread. Her hands were shaking now, years of suppressed rage finally surfacing. You destroyed her life over ambition. We're destroying your career over justice. Don't you dare equate the two. Gregory opened his mouth, then closed it. For perhaps the first time in his professional life, he had nothing to say. Richard cleared his throat. Ms. Markham, if we agree to your terms, full investigation, restitution, public accountability, you'll maintain the partnership with our dentists. I looked at Sophie, then at Victoria. This was the moment of decision, the fulcrum on which everything balanced. With conditions, I said. I report directly to the board, not through any intermediary. Sophie Calder is promoted to Senior Strategic Analyst, reporting to me. Every woman wronged by Gregory gets a formal apology and the opportunity to return if they choose. And Gregory's name is removed from every project, every strategy, every initiative he stole. The historical revision alone would be, Patricia started, necessary. Victoria finished. That's what justice looks like. It's messy, expensive, and embarrassing. But it's also the only way forward. The final documentation lay spread across the conference table like evidence at a trial. My terms, printed on our dentist letterhead, waiting for signatures. Gregory's termination papers, the restitution agreements, the public statement that would go out within the hour. Richard Blackstone's hand trembled slightly as he signed each document. This will fundamentally change how we operate, he said, trying to salvage some authority. That's the point, Victoria replied, watching him with the satisfaction of a chess master who'd seen 20 moves ahead. Gregory had been silent for the past 10 minutes, his expensive suit now wrinkled, his perfect facade cracked beyond repair. As security arrived to escort him out, the same humiliation he'd planned for me, he stopped at the door. Elena, he said, his voice hollow. I hope you're satisfied. I met his gaze steadily. I'm not doing this for satisfaction, Gregory. I'm doing it so the next brilliant woman who walks through these doors doesn't have to watch her back every second, doesn't have to document every conversation, doesn't have to prove she deserves what she's already earned. He left without another word, 2 security guards flanking him as he walked the same path he'd intended for me just hours ago. Through the glass walls, I could see employees stopping to stare, phones coming out, the rumor mill already churning at full speed. Sophie closed her laptop with a decisive click. The press release just went live. The Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Bloomberg, they all have it. Our dentist group announces comprehensive investigation into corporate misconduct, pledges industry-leading reforms. And Gregory? Richard asked. His LinkedIn has already been updated, Sophie said with grim satisfaction. Former VP of Business Development. I'm sure the comment section will be educational. Victoria stood, gathering her things. Elena, Sophie, my car is waiting. We have a new division to build. Richard, I expect the partnership papers signed and delivered by tomorrow morning. Any delays, and the offer is withdrawn. As we walked through the Ardentis offices one last time, something remarkable happened. People began standing up from their desks. First one, then another, then dozens. Not applauding, that would have been too much, but acknowledging. Women who'd been silenced, men who'd been disgusted but afraid to speak up, junior employees who'd witnessed the toxicity but felt powerless. Margaret from HR was crying at her desk. Patricia Stern was already on the phone, probably with legal, trying to salvage her own career. But it was the 7 empty desks that hit me hardest, the ghosts of women who should have been there, building their dreams instead of rebuilding their lives. In the elevator, Sophie finally allowed herself a real smile. Rebecca would have loved this, she said softly. She always said the best revenge wasn't destroying your enemies. It was making sure they could never hurt anyone else. What will you do now? I asked her. Victoria's offer is generous. but I think I need some time. 3 years of planning revenge doesn't leave much room for anything else. Maybe I'll travel. Figure out who I am when I'm not hunting Gregory Vance. The elevator opened to the lobby, where a crowd of reporters had already gathered. News traveled fast in the financial district. Ms. N. Markham, can you comment on the allegations against Gregory Vance? Is it true that Sloan Global is creating a new ethics division? Will you be pursuing legal action? Victoria handled them with practiced ease. Our dentist group and Sloan Global are committed to creating a corporate culture of transparency and accountability. Ms. Markham will be leading our new joint initiative, with full autonomy and resources. As for Mr. Vance, I believe the evidence speaks for itself. As we climbed into Victoria's town car, my phone buzzed with messages. Jennifer Martinez. I heard what happened. Thank you. Lisa Wong. Finally, someone stood up to him. Sarah Brennan. The check from our dentist just cleared. You gave us justice. But it was the last message that made me tear up. From an unknown number. My sister Rebecca would have been so proud. Thank you for giving her story an ending. Sophie? I looked over at Sophie, who was staring out the window at the city lights. You know this isn't really an ending, I said. No, she agreed. It's a beginning. For all of us. 6 months later, I stood in my new office, not at our dentist, but at the newly formed Markham Sloan Innovation Division. The walls were glass, but not to intimidate. They were transparent because we had nothing to hide. Sophie had taken Victoria's offer after all, and her corporate intelligence division had already exposed 2 more Gregory Vances at other firms. The 7 women Gregory had wronged. 3 returned to our dentist under new leadership. 2 started their own consulting firm with their restitution money. 1 was teaching business ethics at Wharton. And Rebecca Calder's algorithmic work, finally properly attributed, had been published in the Harvard Business Review. Gregory himself had disappeared from the corporate world entirely. Last I heard, he was teaching basic marketing at a community college in Montana. His applications to return to corporate America consistently rejected. As I looked out at the city where so many battles were fought in silence, I thought about power, how it corrupts, how it blinds, but also how it crumbles when faced with truth meticulously documented and courageously revealed. My assistant knocked, a bright young man named James, who had ideas of his own and wasn't afraid to share them. Ms. Markham? Your 2 o'clock is here. The new client from the Austin conference? I smiled. The Austin conference. Where everything had started to change. Send them in, I said, straightening the photo on my desk. 7 women at a dinner party, raising glasses to Rebecca Calder's memory and to their own resilience. The client walked in, and I stood to greet them, no longer afraid of being undermined, no longer looking over my shoulder. Gregory had tried to erase me, but instead, he created something he never could have anticipated. A woman with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. And that woman had won. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate revenge and justice. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to hear in the comments below and connect with fellow listeners from around the world. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed or experienced workplace injustice? How did you handle it? Your stories and perspectives make this community special.